The only gift I want, my son said, his voice clear enough to cut through the laughter, is for you to disappear. That was how he greeted me, on his own birthday, in front of his wife, his children, and in the living room of the house I built with my hands. I had walked in holding a wrapped present, something I had chosen carefully, foolishly thinking it might mean something. He didn't even glance at it. He just leaned back in his chair, wearing that thin, cruel smile, as though the room itself was his stage and I was nothing more than the punchline. For a moment, everything blurred. The laughter, the chatter, the sound of forks against plates, all of it faded until there was only that word, echoing in my skull like a hammer against hollow wood. Disappear. Not leave, not rest. Disappear. As if my very existence was an inconvenience, an obstacle in his life, that he was too impatient to wait out. I stood there clutching the box that suddenly felt useless in my hands. Eyes shifted toward me, some with pity, others with discomfort, a few with something colder, like they agreed. My breath caught, and for the briefest second, I thought of Helen, my wife, who used to whisper that birthdays were sacred. She said they were reminders, that life itself was a gift. Now here I was, being told by my own son that my life was no gift at all. What they didn't know was that I had already begun to prepare. I had seen the signs long before this night, the papers shuffled out of my reach, the whispers I wasn't meant to hear, the little humiliations disguised as help. That birthday wasn't just a celebration, it was a verdict. And as I stood there, humiliated but unbroken, I made a silent promise, one that would change everything. I used to think houses remembered the hands that built them. I used to think mine did. Helen and I moved into this place when Nixon was still on TV. We painted every room twice, the first time to make it ours, the second to fix what we did wrong when we were too excited to wait for the first coat to dry. I carved our initials into the underside of the kitchen table with a pocket knife. The week we found out we were having Michael. If you run your fingers along the edge, you can still feel the R+H, like a heartbeat hiding in wood. After Helen died, the house got quieter, quiet in the polite way, like it was trying not to make my grief feel small. Michael and Vanessa moved in for a while when his company downsized. Just till things even out, he said. Then the lease at their old place got complicated. Then the school district made more sense here, and a while became a year, then 2. Then I stopped tracking it, because some math is better left to people who like losing counts. I didn't mind, at first. Lucy's footsteps turned the hallway into a song again. The smell of waffles came back on Saturday mornings. Voices bounced off the plaster the way voices are supposed to in a house that's lived right. If I noticed Vanessa rearranging drawers, changing the way my dishes stacked, buying a ceramic leaf-shaped dish for my keys, and putting it on the narrow table beneath the staircase, I decided to call it help. I learned to say thank you to the person who put my own house where she thought I'd find it. Money wasn't the problem. Not really. I had the pension, the savings, the house, paid off, a patch of land by the lake Helen talked me into when lots were cheap. For fishing and a picnic table, she said, for when we're old. It was worth a lot more now than a picnic. I didn't talk about numbers. Numbers make people imagine they're accountants. I preferred to keep my arithmetic in manila folders, organized by date and by Helen's handwriting. The thing is, Dad, Michael began showing up with sentences that started that way. The thing is, none of this is simple anymore. He'd lean on the counter, casual, like a salesman who's learned to make posture do opinions work. Bills, insurance, taxes, health directives. We should streamline, consolidate. Consolidate. Vanessa would echo, like a backup singer who knows the chorus is the part people remember. I told them I was fine. I was, mostly. I forget the names of young doctors who look like they're still losing at shaving, but I don't forget where the will is. I misplaced the jar opener, but not the account numbers. Aging is not the same thing as surrender. That's not what we're saying, Michael would reply, palms up, a gesture he learned somewhere, maybe from a podcast, maybe from the internet. We just need paperwork to reflect reality. The house, the titles. We should put them in our names now, so we can handle whatever comes without red tape. Reality, I'd say, the syllables dry as crackers. Whose? Peter Briggs, old friend, near as close to a lawyer as I let anyone get to my kitchen table, stopped by one Thursday under the pretense of returning a drill. He left with a quiet understanding and advice that fit in a single sentence. If they push you to sign, we can stage the paperwork, unfiled, unrecorded. You keep control until you don't. They'll think they've got what they want. I didn't like the shape of that. I liked less the shape of the house if I didn't learn to bend. So I let a notary come to the dining room one Tuesday, when Vanessa arranged it between Pilates and parent-teacher conferences. I let Michael slide papers across the table with words like transfer and assignment printed in fonts that pretend to be kind. I took a pen. I signed drafts. I watched Vanessa's shoulders drop, like a woman who'd finally learned the ending of a story she'd been pretending was a mystery. I watched Michael pretend not to watch me. "Is that it?" he asked, voice steady like a new bridge. "We're done?" "We're close," I said, and smiled in a way that made my jaw sore. Peter had told me which pages could be signed without being recorded, which signatures could be held, which filings made nothing happen if they never learned how to travel to the right desk. The law likes order, but it loves sequence. If you keep the sequence, you keep the piano from making music. I kept the sequence. I put the drafts in a folder. I did not hand them my life. After that Tuesday, the weather in the house changed. Vanessa bought new towels. The way you buy towels for a guest room you finally admit isn't temporary. She stood in the upstairs hall one afternoon, measuring the walls by walking heel to toe like the hallway had feet. "We could take down this railing," she told Michael. "Open the space, get more light." She meant, "Our house will look prettier in photos." Michael nodded. The way he nods when he hopes a nod is an answer. Lucy didn't change. She's 9. Her loyalties are immediate, to rabbits, to waffles, to the person who lets her stir the batter even when the counter gets sugar on it. She tells the truth in the thoughtless way you laugh when you forget someone told you this wasn't a place for laughing. One afternoon, sitting on the porch steps, she said, "Mom says once everything is in our names, we can move to the house with the pool. Can we have a dog there?" She looked up like I could put my approval on a mortgage. "Maybe," I said. "Dogs like pools." "Grandpa," she added, like she was about to ask for something small. "Will you come too?" I swallowed. "I go where I choose." She nodded, satisfied that I'd chosen right. Nights got thinner. The thermostat dipped lower than I left it. My credit card began to hiccup at the pharmacy. I found my mail tucked into drawers I never open. I told myself this was organization. I told myself a lot of things. The week before Michael's birthday, a white SUV idled across the street while its driver typed something into his phone and tried not to look like a person looking. He got out. He leaned on my fence post. He took a slow appraisal of the angle of the porch. He wore the uniform of a profession that makes living rooms nervous. Slim-fit pants, a V-neck sweater too clean for manual labor, a smile made for commas. "You must be Robert," he said when I stepped outside. "I'm Damon." We spoke on the phone. I represent a couple eager to make a competitive offer. No contingencies. We didn't speak, I said. He glanced at his phone like it might correct me. Ah, my mistake. Michael gave me this number. He showed me a contact. Dad. House. I am Dad, I said. The house belongs to a man who reads his own mail. Damon's smile tried to find a different job. Of course, I'll loop back with your son. You'll loop back with my lawyer, I said, though Damon wasn't the type who believes in outside loops. When Michael came home, he told me Damon had just been in the neighborhood. Vanessa told me the market was strong for once, like the market had been cheating and now finally wanted to confess. I told them the fence post Damon leaned on was cedar I bought from a man named Harold in 1981, and that made all of us feel less certain about which facts mattered. The night before the party, I sat at Helen's desk and opened the blue folder she labeled when. She didn't write if, she wrote when. Inside, instructions in her tidy, tilting script: who to call, what to ignore, where the safe key lived, which thing she wanted Lucy to have that nobody else would understand without being told. A photograph of Michael at 5 fell out and landed face up on the blotter. He had a gap where a tooth would later claim him. I put the photo back gently, like I was tucking a boy into a story he didn't know he was still in. In the morning, I trimmed a sprig of rosemary and tied it with twine. Then I wrapped a notebook. That birthday was not the beginning. It was the confirmation. Humiliation doesn't have to be loud to count. It can be a thermostat turned down to a number that makes your knuckles ache. It can be a ceramic dish you never asked for that now tells your keys where to sleep. It can be a credit card that decides to perform its theater in public. 2 days after the party, I went to the hardware store for light bulbs and sandpaper. I like the old bulbs, the warm ones that make faces kinder. The young man at the register said, "Chip or swipe?" as if those were moral positions. I swiped. The machine beeped. He frowned. "Declined," he said, and looked past me to check whether I'd brought a person who knew how to fix me. "It's a mistake," I said, and swiped again. The beep had the same opinion. "Try this one," I told him, and handed a different card. That one worked. I bought bulbs. I bought sandpaper. I bought the right to keep my face the same temperature as everyone else's. At home, I asked Michael if there was a glitch. "Probably," he said, eyes on his phone. "Sometimes the bank flags stuff. I'll consolidate so it's seamless." "Seamless," Vanessa echoed from the pantry, labeling bins. Spices, snacks, Robert. My bin had decaf tea and crackers that taste like a dare. I laughed. "I've been finding tea without labels since Carter." "It's easier this way," she said, and slid the plastic tub onto the bottom shelf where ease goes to be overseen. Mail began to arrive, already opened. The little window in the envelope, now a mouth that had told someone else my numbers first. When I reached for the stack on the foyer table, Vanessa pinched it with 2 fingers and said, "I'll just sort. Bills stress you." She doesn't know what stresses me. It isn't bills. One afternoon, I went to the garage for a hammer and found the safe key on the workbench, moved half an inch from where I left it. That's how you know when you've lived in a place long enough. You can feel when objects remember being touched. I put the key back, sideways this time, a tiny trap only I would notice. The next day, it was sideways and new again. Someone else had noticed. Lucy noticed things without meaning to. She wandered into the den after school with a sheet of construction paper covered in glue and silver glitter. "I made a planet," she announced, and shook it so the galaxy fell in my lap. "Looks like Jupiter," I said. "Mom says we won't need the planets on this wall after we move," she added, like she was telling me a menu changed. "She says the new house has a wall big enough for a real mural, with a sea, and dolphins." She paused, thinking. "Do dolphins live in seas?" She shook her head. "Anyway," she said, "as soon as all the papers are in our names, We can pick paint colors. In our names, I repeated. Which names are those? Mine too, she said brightly. She said I get to choose the bedroom with the window over the pool, but only if Grandpa signs properly this time. Properly. I folded the glitter planet in half, because glitter looks less like a problem when it's folded. That evening, I went to the den to watch the Pirates lose in a way I find reassuring. Michael's laptop screen glowed in the next room. His voice drifted in. The deed is basically done. We're just waiting on the county record. Yeah, he signed. It's not filed yet, but he thinks it is. Once it's recorded, we can list. No, he won't get in the way. Vanessa's on it. I stepped into the doorway. Michael closed the laptop like it had told a secret. He didn't look guilty. Guilt looks for permission. He looked settled. Work call, he said. Mine too, I said. I work on not being erased. He laughed as if I'd told a joke about weather. Dad, come on. Vanessa began hosting conversations in front of me about me, as if I were the dog learning to love the crate. We'll need to address the old wallpaper. Buyers hate wallpaper. Do we keep the original fixtures or replace them with brushed nickel? Is the garden salvageable or do we just seed over everything before winter? I like the garden, I would say. You won't have to maintain it, she would reply. We'll get you someplace with a service. Prison has a service, I said once. She pretended not to hear. The realtor came back. Damon. He wore a different sweater, same teeth. I brought comps, he told Michael, and spread photos of other people's kitchens on my table like a deck of cards. We'll stage this room to look more neutral. People like to imagine themselves here. He glanced at me. No offense. None taken, I said. I've done my share of imagining. Good bones, Damon said, tapping the photo of my dining room. Shame about the oak. Buyers prefer light. It's not a shame, I said. It's a decision. Michael cleared his throat. We can refinish. You can move, I said. We smiled at each other like men who understand they're not in the same conversation. The next morning, a letter arrived addressed to me, but the return address had already been peeled and folded. I opened it at the sink. Inside, a notice from the life insurance company. Change of secondary beneficiary confirmed. Michael Thompson. Effective date last month. I had not signed a change. I had not asked for one. But I could imagine when it happened. The afternoon Vanessa called me from the grocery store and asked for my last 4 digits so she could pay the bill when the card refused to behave. I took the letter to the garage. I put it under the toolbox with the others. The declined receipt from the hardware store. The bank's helpful reminder about automatic draft. A photo of the realtor's card. A note Lucy wrote that said pool and glitter and Grandpa come in pencil beneath it. Paper builds a record. The trick is to lay it flat enough that the right person can read it later and call it fact. On Thursday, Vanessa told me we were out of stamps. I went to Helen's desk. I opened the middle drawer. The stamps weren't in the tray. They were wedged beneath a manila folder labeled in Vanessa's handwriting. House, transfer. Not draft, not discussion, not if. Transfer. I slid the folder out an inch. I saw enough forms to make a person forget his own name. Looking for something, Robert? Vanessa's voice from the doorway, bright as a countertop. Stamps, I said. Check the kitchen, she said. We're updating the files in here. It's easier if everything lives in one place. Easier for whom? I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her shoes already had. At dinner, Michael looked relaxed in a way that means someone has decided a decision happened. I spooned stew into a bowl and listened to him talk about timelines and interest rates and how we should move while the market is rational. I said. It'll be good for everyone, he replied. For everyone, I echoed. and he smiled because he heard agreement when all I'd offered him was vocabulary. That night, I sat at the table after they went to bed and turned Helen's notebook, the one I'd given him, over in my hands. He'd left it where he left the people who give him things his wife doesn't understand, on the sideboard, under catalogs. I opened to Helen's grocery list for that long-ago Christmas after Michael left for college. Cinnamon sticks, whole cloves, nutmeg if on sale. A note in the margin. Don't let him think we're poorer than we are. Just teach him what enough feels like. I closed the book gently and put it back where he could find it if he ever learns how to look. The day after, an invitation arrived in a group text I wasn't supposed to be on. Surprise party for Mike. 40, Sunday at 2. The address was mine. The plan was theirs. Vanessa had added emojis that look like excitement if you don't stare too long. I marked the time on the calendar in the hall. I went to the garden and cut rosemary. I wrapped a notebook. I tied a bow. I didn't sleep the night before the party. Houses creak more when they need you to decide who you are inside them. I walked the rooms and touched the things Helen touched. The back of the dining chair where her sweater always hung. The dent in the hallway baseboard from the day Michael's tricycle escaped him. The spot on the kitchen counter where the varnish is thinner from the heat of pies. I told the house I was still its owner. I told myself I believed me. On Sunday at 2, people arrived carrying bottles of wine with labels designed to look like good taste. Vanessa whispered orders to the air until the air turned into volunteers. Michael paced and smiled and accepted compliments for a party he hadn't planned. When it was time for the wish, I handed him the box. He opened it. The room did what rooms do when hunger meets cake. And then my son told me the only gift he wanted was for me to disappear. It wasn't the worst thing anyone has said. It was the clearest. After the cake, people moved around politely to give the humiliation enough space to cool. I took my coat from the hook by the door, the one Vanessa replaced with the white leaf dish, and went outside for air. The evening had a bite. The rosemary by the steps smelled like every Thanksgiving we ever got right. Through the window, I watched my boy, lift a glass to a room that believes in him. I watched his wife take up the space his mother used to fill. I watched my house pretend to be theirs. Then I went back in, stacked plates, rinsed the knife, and said goodnight to a room full of people who would leave without remembering to look me in the eye. I sat in the den after they were gone. The clock in the hallway said a true thing every second. The blue folder on Helen's desk said a truer thing in silence. In the morning, I called Peter Briggs. "It's time," I said. He didn't ask for what. "Come in at 10, he replied. "Bring your folder, bring your patience. Leave your apology at home." I hung up and put the notebook with Helen's lists in the sideboard where Michael could find it when he learns how to remember. Then I went to the garage and pulled the toolbox. Underneath lay the stack of paper I'd started. Receipts, letters, notes in my hand and in theirs. I added the insurance notice and the names of the people who thought I sleep when I sit still. On top of the stack, I placed a single sheet of yellow legal pad and wrote, in block letters Helen would approve, "I am not a transfer." The pen didn't shake. I made coffee in a mug that is older than my son's marriage. I drank it slow. Then I put on my coat, took the folder, and left for 10 o'clock. Tomorrow, Michael will learn that a draft is not a deed, and that disappear is a word that can go both ways. The week leading up to Michael's birthday felt like being trapped inside a play I hadn't auditioned for. Everyone else seemed to know their lines. Vanessa moving briskly through the house, whispering on the phone about finalizing things and making sure the paperwork is squared away. Michael burying himself in emails but carrying the smug air of a man who believed the future had already been signed and delivered into his hands. And me, the supposed patriarch, reduced to a prop. They thought I'd already handed it all over. They walked lighter, spoke louder, laughed easier. I let them. I carried my silence like a shield, waiting for the moment when silence would be more dangerous than words. At night, lying on the couch in the den, I studied the ceiling beams Helen used to dust herself with a feather duster she insisted on buying from some roadside market. Those beams looked different now, like rafters in someone else's barn. I thought about her voice. This house will keep us safe. The words echoed, mocking. Safe for who? Certainly not for me. Lucy was the only thread left tethering me to softness. She slipped down to the den some nights, Rabbit tucked under her arm, whispering secrets about how her mother was redecorating her room without asking, or how Daddy kept saying, "Soon everything will be easier." She didn't understand what easier meant, but I did. The morning of the party, Vanessa turned the kitchen into a command center. Platters arrived from a catering van, glossy with sauces I couldn't pronounce. Balloons bobbed in the corners, tethered like prisoners. The house smelled of garlic and money, neither of which belonged to me anymore. She barked orders into her phone. Yes, the transfer is basically done. After today, we can really start planning. She looked over at me then, smile too sweet, voice suddenly loud. "Isn't that right, Robert?" I stirred my coffee and let the silence answer. She hated silence. By noon, the guests began to arrive. Neighbors I barely knew. Vanessa's friends in sharp dresses, men from Michael's office who shook my hand like I was a relic they'd heard stories about. I caught sight of one man looking around the house with a realtor's eye, measuring walls, calculating value. The bile rose in my throat. I slipped away to the den, letting the noise swell in the living room. The laughter was wrong. Helen's gatherings used to fill the house with warmth. People sang off-key, children chased each other through the hall. Dishes clattered as she carried too many at once and laughed when I scolded her. This laughter now was brittle, rehearsed, bouncing off the walls like tin coins. When Vanessa finally called for everyone to gather, I forced myself up. My ribs protested with every breath, but dignity carried me straighter. The dining room glowed with candles. The cake sat in the center of the table, a monument of chocolate and gold frosting. "Happy birthday, Michael." He stood at the head of the table, glass in hand, looking every inch the man he thought he'd become. He gave his little speech about legacy and family, about building for the future. His eyes lingered on me, the way a man looks at land he intends to clear. Polite applause followed, clinking glasses, forced smiles. When the noise settled, I rose slowly. From my coat pocket, I pulled the small box. My hand shook, not from age, but from the weight of memory. "Michael," I said, voice steady. "A father doesn't always know the right gift for his son. But this is something your mother and I chose years ago. We thought someday you'd be ready for it." He took the box, curious. He opened it, and the room leaned closer. Inside lay the wristwatch, silver, understated, built to last longer than any of us. Helen had whispered once, "When we give this to him, he'll know we believe in him." For a flicker of a second, I thought I saw it. The boy he'd once been. The boy who used to fall asleep on my chest after baseball games. His lips parted as though he remembered too. But then Vanessa leaned in, her perfume sharp, her words sharper, his mouth twisted. "Thanks, Dad," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "But honestly, the only gift I want this year is for you to stop hanging on, for you to finally step aside, maybe even disappear." The word clanged in the air like a dropped pan. A few guests laughed nervously, mistaking cruelty for humor. Others looked down at their plates. Vanessa smiled wide, as if she'd been waiting for this performance all along. Lucy's hand slid into mine under the table, small fingers gripping until they ached. My chest burned hotter than the candles. The watch, Helen's watch, hung limply in his hand, dismissed like a trinket from a yard sale. I sat back down slowly, every joint heavy with betrayal. I felt Helen beside me, whispering the words she'd written. If they ever make you smaller to make themselves bigger, remember who built the table. When the party ended and the guests spilled out into the cold night, Vanessa hummed cheerfully as she loaded dishes into the sink. Michael disappeared into his office, watch still in its box, unopened again. Lucy curled against me on the couch. "Don't disappear, Grandpa," she whispered. I kissed the top of her head. "Not yet," I said. "Not ever, if I can help it." And as the house went dark, I made my choice. The time for waiting was over. The boy I'd raised had asked for my disappearance as his gift. Instead, I would give him the only present left to me. The truth, sharpened, legal, undeniable. That night, sleep did not come. The house was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that rests you. It was the quiet of a courtroom after the gavel falls, when everyone waits to see if the sentence will be carried out. I lay on the couch in the den, ribs still aching, Lucy's stuffed rabbit forgotten on the armrest beside me. My son's words replayed again and again, jagged as broken glass. "The only gift I want is your disappearance." Once I had thought words couldn't kill. They had no weight, no blade. But I knew better now. Words could bury you long before the dirt hit your coffin. They could shrink you into a shadow in your own home. I closed my eyes and remembered birthdays long ago, when Michael was a boy and the house was full of noise. Helen in the kitchen, frosting a cake. Michael in the yard, shouting for his friends to follow him into the treehouse I built with my own hands. Back then, he looked at me as though I was 10 feet tall. The man who could lift him onto his shoulders, who could fix broken toys, who could make the world safe. And now? The man he wanted to erase. By dawn, I had decided, the time for silence had passed. Helen's folder still sat in the safe behind the den paneling, her handwriting steady even through the fog of illness. Remember who built the table. Her words were no longer comfort. They were orders. I dressed carefully, shirt ironed, jacket brushed. A man looks weaker when he looks careless, and I refused to let them see weakness again. My ribs protested with every movement, but pain is sometimes the proof you're still standing. Michael had left early for work. Vanessa's car was gone too. The house smelled of lemon cleaner, too sharp, covering something sour. I slipped into the den, pressed the panel, and pulled out the folder. The will, the deed, the letter Helen had written, her neat script cutting straighter than any lawyer's pen. For a moment I held the papers against my chest, the way a drowning man might clutch a piece of wood. Then I tucked them under my coat and stepped into the morning air. The walk to Daniel Briggs's office felt longer than it used to, though it was just 3 blocks downtown. My ribs throbbed with every step, but pain can be a kind of company. It reminds you you're still alive, still fighting. The streets I had walked 1,000 times seemed different now. The diner where Helen and I used to share lemon meringue pie. The hardware store where I bought nails for the treehouse. Each building was a witness, and I wondered if they, too, judged me for letting my own son carve me out of my life. Daniel looked up as I entered, eyes widening. "Robert." He rose, gripped my hand. His office smelled of old leather and sharper truths. Books lined the shelves, spines bent from years of being opened when someone needed saving. "What's happened?" I laid the folder on his desk. My fingers lingered on the blue paper before I let go. "It's happening. They think I've signed everything. They're waiting for the last papers." But I haven't, and I won't. He nodded slowly, opening the folder, scanning. His eyes narrowed at the insurance policy, at the old deed. You still have leverage. That's good. He looked at me, voice low. We'll play this carefully. Make them believe they've won, until the law says otherwise. For 2 hours, we went through options. Durable power of attorney, quitclaim deeds, trusts. Words that sounded simple enough, but carried the power to uproot a man's entire life. I listened, wrote notes, asked the same questions twice when the legal language tangled. Daniel was patient. Helen had once said he had the soul of a carpenter. He built clarity out of confusion. At the end, he leaned forward. Here's what we'll do. We'll draft a transfer on paper. Enough to show them something if they press. But we won't file it. Nothing leaves your control until you say so. Meanwhile, we'll file a new trust. Everything, house, savings, pension, flows into it. You keep lifetime rights. When you're gone, it goes to Lucy. Not Michael, not Vanessa, only Lucy. My throat tightened. You can do that? I already started. He tapped a stack of forms. I suspected this was where you'd land. Sometimes old friends know before you say it. I sat back, lungs aching with something that wasn't pain this time. Relief, maybe, or the first breath of real defiance. Before I left, Daniel fixed me with a look. Robert, listen carefully. You can't confront them yet. Let them show their hands. Let them brag. Let them say out loud what they're planning. The more arrogance, the stronger your case. Collect everything, dates, times, words. Write it all. Record if you can. It's not paranoia. It's preparation. I nodded. I had already begun. The old recorder waited in my pocket, its tape half filled with Vanessa's laughter and Michael's silence. When I walked home, the sun was low, the maple tree throwing broken shadows across the driveway. Vanessa's car was back. Through the window, I saw her in the kitchen, talking on the phone, her hand slicing the air as though she were conducting an orchestra of schemes. I stepped inside. She turned, smile too bright. Robert, we were just talking about you. I hung my coat, careful with my folder. Were you? Of course, she said lightly. Michael and I agree it's best to move things quickly. After your little fall, we can't afford to wait. The lawyer comes Monday. Isn't that wonderful? I smiled back, though it felt like stretching a scar. Wonderful, I said. She didn't notice the recorder blinking red in my pocket. That night, as I sat in the den, Lucy crept in again. She held her rabbit out to me. Grandpa, she whispered, Mom says soon you won't have to worry about the house anymore. That it'll all be easier. I pulled her close, pressing my lips to her hair. Sweetheart, I murmured. Sometimes easier isn't better. Sometimes easier means forgetting what matters. She looked at me, puzzled, then whispered, Don't let them forget you. I promised her I wouldn't. And when she padded upstairs, I opened Helen's letter one more time. The words steadied me like a hand on my shoulder. If they make you smaller to make themselves bigger, remember who built the table. I whispered back into the silence. I built it, and I'm not done sitting at it. The decision to fight doesn't arrive with trumpets. It shows up on a grocery list. Saturday morning, I stood under the supermarket's humming lights, weighing lemons the way Helen taught me, thumb pressing gently near the stem, testing for that hidden give. A good lemon, she'd say, feels like it's keeping a secret. I put 3 in the basket, 1 for the roast, 1 for tea, and 1 for the memory. The butcher wrapped the chuck in white paper with the same easy rhythm I remembered from the year the Steelers went all the way. He slid it across the counter. Special dinner? He asked. Family, I said. close enough to the truth to pass. Back home, I ironed the old tablecloth with Helen's stitched daisies along the edge. The iron hissed like it disapproved of wrinkles and hesitation. Plates squared to the table edge. Forks aligned. Water glasses catching late light. Rituals matter. They do the talking when you don't trust your voice. In that room, I needed the house to remember me as the man who built it, not the shadow they kept trying to cast. The roast went into the oven with garlic and thyme. The air began to forgive. On the stovetop, I warmed carrots in butter the honest way, not the way magazines suggest when they want dinner to taste like restraint. I wanted comfort to loosen their shoulders. People get careless when their appetites are satisfied. On the sideboard, I folded a dish towel twice and slid the old recorder beneath it. The little red eye winked once, like a friend who knows what you're about to do and doesn't judge. I checked the batteries again. Experience says plans fail for small reasons. Tonight couldn't afford one. At 3:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, a text came from Michael. "Dad, quick heads up. Just talking to a guy about a possible appraisal Monday. No big deal. Love you. Appraisal." My jaw set. People who intend to ask permission don't schedule appointments first. I forwarded the text to Daniel with 3 words. "Document this, please." He replied almost instantly. "Got it. Keep calm. Collect words." I basted the roast. Opened the front window an inch to let Rosemary from the planter remind the kitchen who lived here first. The timer ticked its indifferent rhythm. Upstairs, the house settled, wood remembering it was once a tree. That sound used to make me feel safe. Tonight it sounded like a witness clearing its throat. By late afternoon, the living room had that warm, forgiving haze that comes only from real food and clean glass. The good plates didn't make noise when I set them down. After 40 years, even porcelain learns manners. I put the envelope they'd brought last time, thick, smug paper, into the drawer where we once kept party napkins. It helped to know where the enemy liked to sit. Lucy patted in, rabbit by one ear. A conspirator's whisper. "Do you need help, Grandpa?" She looked proud when I handed her napkins. She folded them careful as a librarian. "Chicken legs," she said, mishearing me. "No," I said, smiling. "Table legs. Keep them steady." She giggled. For one breath, the room felt like it remembered how. At 6:58, headlights drifted over the hedge. Vanessa's perfume entered the foyer an instant before she did. Michael followed, holding a bottle of wine with the helpless energy of a man who thinks labels fix everything. "It smells cozy," Vanessa said, like the syllables might stain her blouse. "Wash up," I said. Michael obeyed on reflex. Boys learn manners before they learn defiance. Vanessa didn't move. She walked to the table, lifted a fork, checked its reflection, as if the metal owed her a better face. We sat. I poured water first. My father taught me that. Water before wine, so no one confuses thirst with appetite. Vanessa lifted her glass without a toast. She does not believe in blessings she doesn't dispense. "Dad," Michael said too brightly. "How are your ribs?" "Honest," I said. "They tell me when I'm trying to do too much." Vanessa laid her napkin on her lap with courtroom neatness. "We should not waste time," she said. "After your incident, we agreed it's best to work quickly. Transfer of responsibilities. Health proxies. It's prudent." The word came out polished and hollow. She reached into her bag and set an envelope by my plate. Thick paper. Heavy with presumption. For a moment, I didn't move. My hand remembered letters from American Express and the mortgage company and Helen's last insurance renewal. Paper used to deliver good news to this house. Raises, refunds, birthday cards with confetti that gets into the rug and stays like a second holiday. Now paper wanted to rearrange history. Eat while it's hot, I said gently. Men make bad decisions hungry. We cut into the roast. The room softened. A little. Butter will do that. Michael's shoulders came down from his ears. Vanessa ate the carrots like she wanted to discipline them. Utilities are high, she said eventually, glancing toward the thermostat like a sheriff inspecting a saloon. It would be easier in a condo. Easier, I said. A light word carrying a heavy suitcase. Silence breathed. The recorder purred, patient, unseen. Michael cleared his throat. Dad, listen. We talked to someone about an appraisal. Just information gathering. Monday, maybe. He used the same tone he used at 14 after denting Helen's Buick. Half apology, half excuse, no ownership. Ah, I said. You've skipped to the middle of the conversation. Let's start at the beginning. Vanessa set down her fork. Fine. The beginning? You fell. We can all pretend that wasn't a sign, but adults read signs. This house is a burden. I lifted a hand. We can go one at a time. You're younger, you go first. A flash of annoyance crossed her face. The kind you see when someone remembers she doesn't own the furniture yet. It's simple, she said. Sign the transfer. We'll handle the house, the bills, the accounts. You'll be comfortable, safe, and close to family. Which family? I asked. Michael frowned. Vanessa's smile tightened. Don't be petty, Richard. Names are not pettiness, I said. They are clarity. Let's be clear. Vanessa slid the envelope closer with 2 fingers, as if she was feeding an animal she didn't trust. It's a good offer. Practical. Kind. Kindness, I said softly, does not need witnesses. While she watched the envelope, I adjusted the dish towel on the sideboard with an unbothered hand and gave the recorder a quarter turn, the mic angling toward her impatience. I could hear Daniel in my head. Don't argue. Collect. So I collected. Dad. Michael tried again, gentler. We're not the enemy. This is about safety. There's that word again, I said. In my experience, safety comes with handrails and steady hands, not signatures that write a man off the title he earned. Vanessa laughed once, a brittle note. You're being dramatic. Drama is theater, I said. This is accounting. The kitchen clock ticked as if it referred the matter to itself. Somewhere outside, a car door thudded and a dog objected. Ordinary sounds, loyal to no side. I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. Do you know what Helen said about paperwork? I asked the middle of the table. Michael blinked. Vanessa rolled her eyes, which is the secret handshake of the impatient. I'm sure it was profound, she said. It was practical, I said. She said paperwork is like water. It runs where you dig. Vanessa met my eyes across the plates. Then dig the right direction. I have, I said. Quietly. They didn't catch the meaning, which was good. The best fences are the ones you place while guests compliment your garden. I reached for the envelope. The paper had that expensive tooth to it that makes people believe it knows better. I lifted it, felt the weight, then set it back without opening. I'm not refusing, I said. Vanessa's eyebrow lifted. I'm recording. I stood, slow and deliberate, the way a man stands when his body insists on being consulted. 2 steps to the sideboard, lifted the towel, pressed stop. The tiny reels stilled with the softest click, which sounded to me like a gavel. I set the recorder on the table between the salt and my untouched wine. It rested there like a little black truth. Vanessa's smile emptied out. What is that? A mirror, I said. For words. Michael's face went the color of old paper. Dad. I don't twist anything, I continued. I preserve dates, times, requests, threats. I kept my tone calm, the way a foreman speaks when he knows the beam will hold. Vanessa recovered quickly, like a juror deciding the evidence is inadmissible. So you'll, what, take us to court? Parade your family in front of strangers? You think anyone cares? The county clerk will care about signatures, I said. The bank cares about titles. And one day, Lucy will care about the story you tried to write. So yes, someone will care. Michael reached for his water and found his wine. The glass clicked his teeth. He set it down too hard and flinched like the noise had betrayed him. Listen, he said, eyes on me, not her. The appraisal isn't a decision. It's data. We're trying to be responsible. Responsible, I repeated, as if testing whether the word had spoiled. A fine word when it concerns your own property. I let that breathe. I do not live in data, son. I live in a house I paid for, in a life I built. Vanessa leaned in, voice lower now, all sugar hardened to glass. Richard, you can either make this easy or you can make it legal. Either way, we will not spend another winter watching you climb those stairs. Then, I said, look away. Her mouth opened, closed. Anger rearranged her face, searching for a shape that wins. Time to move the temperature 1 degree. I slid a second envelope from the sideboard, thin, official. I didn't push it across, just let it rest near my hand. In the spirit of clarity, I said, this contains notices prepared by Daniel Briggs, certified, addressed, stamped. They do not leave this house tonight. But they will if one more realtor sets foot on my porch uninvited. If one more phone call uses the word conservator. If one more child is asked to carry a message that belongs to adult mouths. Michael swallowed. Vanessa stared at the envelope like it might bite. What notices? She asked. The kind that stop people mistaking desire for authority, I said. To the county. To the realtor whose card you left on the hall table yesterday. Yes, Vanessa, I saw it. To the buyer's agent whose voicemail asked if Monday works for a quick walkthrough. Monday does not work. A flush rose under her foundation. You went through my things. I smiled politely. You left them on my table. The room tightened again. The house listened. I turned the recorder so the little eye faced me and spoke steadily, for it and for them. Here are my terms. Michael tensed. Vanessa's chin lifted. 1, I said, holding up a finger. There will be no showings, appraisals, or discussions about sale or transfer of this property without my written invitation. Not consent, invitation. 2, another finger. No one uses Lucy to deliver warnings. The next time my granddaughter tells me to watch the stairs as if she's repeating a line fed to her, I will assume you prefer letters to conversation. Stamped letters, with tracking numbers. 3, a third finger. If you wish to come to this house, you come as family, not as project managers. That means you arrive with empty hands and open mouths if an apology is owing. We eat pie. We do not discuss square footage or liquidity. Vanessa laughed without humor. Pie. On Sunday, I said. 2 o'clock. Michael closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he looked like the boy I took fishing once, the day it rained so hard we came home with nothing but a story. Dad, he said, we're under pressure. Everyone is, I said. Pressure reveals what you've become. It doesn't justify what you do. The clock in the hall contributed its honest syllable. Tick. Vanessa pushed back from the table so fast the chair protested. You will regret this, she said through her teeth, when you fall again and nobody hears you. I met her eyes. Cruelty is a poor insurance policy. She turned to Michael. We're done. Michael stood slower, his shame audible in the legs of the chair. He lingered. "Dad, did you really?" He nodded at the recorder. "Record me?" "I preserved us," I said. "Because one day you'll be grateful the truth didn't rely on memory." He nodded once, miserably. "Sunday," he said, "not a promise, a possibility." 2:00, I said, empty hands. They left. The door closed more loudly than it needed to. The house inhaled. Rooms do that after storms. They take stock of what's still standing. I carried the roast to the counter, sliced it, ate one honest plate at the table I built, the recorder beside my fork like a small, loyal dog. Food has a way of teaching the body that it isn't at war with itself. After the dishes, I filled the sink too high with hot water on purpose. Steam loosened the ache in my ribs. Lemon lifted from the cutting board, and for a second, it smelled like Helen's laughter at a joke I've forgotten but still miss. Then I dried my hands, sat at the desk, and began to write in block letters, neat like she liked. 1. Clarity isn't cruelty. 2. Boundaries aren't punishment. 3. Sunday is for pie. I slid the page into the drawer beside the recorder and the thin envelope with Daniel's letters that were not yet letters. My phone buzzed. A voicemail transcription appeared from a number that never leaves fingerprints. "Confirming Monday 10 a.m. appraisal, quick walkthrough, 5 minutes tops." I saved it. Sent it to Daniel. Wrote the time and date in my notebook. People love to call 5 minutes nothing, especially when it changes everything. I turned out the kitchen lights but left the porch lamp on. The kind of hospitality you extend to yourself when you're the one coming home. On my way to the den, Lucy's rabbit lay where she'd left it earlier, one ear floppy, the other stubborn. I set it on the arm of the chair and sat. For a while I listened to the heater's thin song and the maple scratching the window like an absent friend. I clicked the recorder on and spoke in a low voice so the walls could hear too. "This is Robert Thompson, Saturday night. Michael and Vanessa came to dinner. Presented an envelope requesting transfer of assets and title. Used words: practical, safe, responsibility. I stated terms. Recorder captured conversation. Appraisal voicemail received 8:51 p.m. Saved and forwarded. Sunday at 2, invited for pie. Conversation without business. If they decline, next step, letters filed. That is all." I clicked stop. Silence returned. The good kind this time. The kind that means the house trusts you again. Sleep did not arrive quickly, but when it came, it felt earned. Not a gift. A wage. The little recorder sat in my pocket like a stone, heavier than its weight. They didn't know I had it, but they acted as if they felt it. The house after company leaves always feels different. Hollowed out, like the walls had been holding their breath, and now exhale in relief. That night, the silence was sharp enough to cut. 2 half-empty glasses still sweated on the table. Vanessa's chair angled away from the table as though even the furniture refused to welcome her back. I should have felt triumphant. I'd stood my ground, spoken my piece, backed it with evidence. But triumph is a young man's word. What I felt was ache in my ribs and a watchfulness in my bones. Because people like Vanessa don't retreat. They regroup. At 9:42, the phone rang. An unknown number. That's the thing about people who want control. They hate leaving fingerprints. I pressed record on the device Bernie had insisted I keep near the phone, then answered. A sharp inhale, then her voice. "You think you're clever," Vanessa said, skipping greetings. "Recording us like some spy, running to lawyers like a tattletale schoolboy." "I'm protecting myself," I said. She snorted. "Paper burns. Tapes break. What do you think you'll do when you're lying on the floor again, gasping, and your precious lawyer's at home asleep? You'll call Mark? Me? Good luck with that. Her laughter was brittle, high, designed to rattle. I let the silence stretch. Silence, when you mean it, is heavier than words. Finally, I said, "Every threat you make tonight lives on tape." A pause. Then she sharpened her voice. "Mark loves you, sure, but love doesn't pay bills. He'll come around. He won't waste his life waiting for you to decide when enough is enough. You're not the only one who knows how to play long games." "Then play them," I said. "But don't use my granddaughter as your messenger again." Her laughter cut off. Then the line went dead. I logged the call in my notebook. Time. Date. Threat implied. My hand shook less than I expected. That notebook was getting fat, and fat notebooks are good friends in courtrooms. The morning smelled of frost. The rosemary out front dusted white. I sipped coffee on the porch steps, careful with the mug, careful with my balance. Across the street, Mrs. Reynolds waved from her driveway. She didn't ask what she'd heard through the cold night air. Raised voices carry. She just lifted her thermos in a silent toast. Neighbors know when to mind business and when to mind hearts. At 10 sharp, Alvarez called. "They'll test you now," he said, calm as if he'd seen storms wait their turn before. "Expect pressure. Subtle, maybe not. Don't respond except through me. Understood?" "Understood." "Good," he said. "And Richard, most men wait too long. You didn't." After we hung up, I opened Helen's blue folder again. Her handwriting leaned to the right, neat even in illness. She had thought of everything. Reading it steadied me, but it also broke something small inside, because she knew this day would come. The day her family would test whether I was a man to respect or a prize to claim. That afternoon, Avery arrived, braids crooked, backpack too big for her shoulders. She burst in like sunlight. "Grandpa, can we bake cookies?" Of course. She cracked the eggs too hard, shells slipping in. I fished them out with fingers steadier than they had any right to be. She chattered about school, about a friend's puppy, about a math test she aced. Precious things, ordinary things. Then, with no malice, she said it. "Mom said to remind you to be careful on the stairs, because accidents happen fast." The spoon slipped in the bowl. My breath caught. "What exactly did she say?" I asked gently. Avery frowned, searching. She said, "Tell Grandpa to watch his step. You never know when the next fall might be the last." She added, earnest, "I think she meant because of your leg." I smiled for her sake, though it tasted like ash. "That's thoughtful, sweetheart. Thank you." Inside, fury burned. Vanessa was still planting her poison in small mouths, using a child as her courier. That cruelty was beyond paperwork. I wanted to storm across town, shout until the walls of her house bent inward. But Alvarez's voice anchored me. "Don't fight in their theater. Fight on yours." So I baked. We burned half the batch, laughed over the smoke, and I let that laughter be louder than the rage. That evening, Mark called. His voice was frayed. "Dad, can we talk?" "We did," I said. "I mean without her. Privately." I waited. "She's intense," he said at last. "She pushes, but you've got to understand where she's coming from. Security, money, the kids." "And you?" I asked. A long pause. Then, "I'm worried about you." "Then worry enough to stand up when someone pushes me down," I said. "Worry enough not to let your daughter carry your wife's threats in her backpack." He inhaled sharply. "She didn't." "She did," I cut in. "I heard it from Avery's lips. I don't want to hear it again, Icons." Then, softer, "I'll talk to her." "Do more than talk," I said. "Choose." He didn't answer, just said, "Sunday, 2 o'clock, we'll be there." That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the halls, hand trailing the walls lined with photographs. Michael missing his front teeth, Helen in her garden hat, Avery asleep on my chest. These walls didn't just hold furniture, they held memory. That's what Vanessa never understood. This wasn't real estate. This was existence. At Helen's desk, I set a fresh legal pad, pressed the recorder's red button, and spoke. This is Richard Thompson. I make this record because family can fail you, but facts cannot. If anything happens to me, this voice remains. I listed it all. The fall, the pressure, the realtor, the envelopes, the phone calls, Avery's warning. My voice steady, my breath slow. When I finished, I clicked stop. The tape whirred into silence. That silence felt like armor. The backlash had begun, but so had the counterweight. And in that balance, truth felt heavy enough to matter. Sunday afternoons used to mean Helen's chili simmering on the stove and the Steelers on TV. Now Sunday meant waiting for a battle under my own roof. I set 2 glasses of water on the dining table. Not wine, not coffee. This wasn't about hospitality. This was about clarity. At exactly 2 o'clock, the front door opened without a knock. Mark stepped in first, shoulders tight. Vanessa followed, heels striking the hardwood like gavels. Avery trailed behind, clutching her rabbit. I bent down to her level. Sweetheart, why don't you read in the den? She hesitated, then nodded. She understood more than they gave her credit for. The 3 of us sat. Silence stretched, thick as wet wool. Vanessa broke it first. Richard, she said, syrup over steel. We need to end this ugliness, all this drama. It's not good for anyone. I folded my hands. Drama ends when respect begins. Her laugh was thin. Respect? You're letting lawyers come between family. No, I said softly. You did. Mark cleared his throat. Dad, can we just talk this through? No threats, no paperwork, just us. Fine, I said. Then tell me, whose idea was it to have Avery carry your warnings? Vanessa's face tightened. That's ridiculous. Mark's eyes flicked down. I told her it was wrong, he muttered. And yet it happened, I said. So forgive me if I don't trust words anymore. I placed the recorder on the table. Its red light blinked like a heartbeat. Vanessa's smile faltered. What's that? Proof, I said. Every call, every slip, every time arrogance made you sloppy. Mark leaned forward. Dad, I raised a hand. Not this time. I gave you chances, at dinner, on the phone, even last night, and each time, you chose silence. The room tightened. Even the clock in the hall seemed to hold its tick. Vanessa snapped. So what? You'll drag your son into court? You'll make Avery live through gossip and shame? You think anyone cares about an old man clutching papers? I met her eyes. The state cares. Banks care. Judges care. And someday, Avery will care. She'll read these papers and know her grandfather stood when others knelt. Mark's face cracked then. Just a flicker, but enough. Here's what happens now, I said, my voice steady as the oak table beneath my palms. The will stands. The house remains mine. And when I'm gone, Avery inherits. Not you two. Vanessa's jaw dropped. You can't. I can, I cut in. Already filed, already notarized, already airtight. Her face drained of color. Rage has colors when it runs out of words. Mark whispered, What about us? I looked at him long. Not nothing, but not enough to reward betrayal. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Vanessa shoved her chair back so hard it screeched. Come on, Mark, we're done here. But Mark didn't move. He just sat, staring at his hands. Mark, she hissed. Finally, he rose. Not with dignity, not with defiance, just with defeat. Together they left, the slam of the door sounding smaller than it once did. That night, The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in months. Not tense, not waiting, just quiet. Avery patted in, Rabbit in her arms. "Grandpa? Are they mad?" "Yes," I said. "Did you do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart. Sometimes people get mad when you finally say no." She thought about that, then set the rabbit in my lap. "Keep him tonight. He makes bad dreams go away." I pulled her close, throat tight. "Thank you." After she left, I sat at Helen's old desk. Outside, frost clung to the rosemary. I thought of my son, not the man who'd just walked out, but the boy in the baseball glove. I thought of Helen, who had warned me with her neat handwriting. If they ever make you smaller to make themselves bigger, remember who built the table. I touched the recorder. Then I touched the folder. The storm had come, and for once, I was still standing. Some nights, the stairs still call to me. I grip the railing. My ribs ache where they once cracked. And I remember the sound of wood against bone. But now, when I climb, I hear another sound too. Avery's small voice. "Be careful, Grandpa." Not Vanessa's warning. Not Michael's excuse. Hers. The house breathes easier these days. Pictures stay where I leave them. The thermostat holds its warmth. The quiet isn't an enemy anymore. It's a companion. I still keep the recorder in the drawer. Not because I need it, but because it reminds me. Memory has weight when you put it on paper or on tape. One evening, as the sun folded behind the maples, I sat at Helen's desk with a cup of tea. The rosemary outside glittered with frost, stubborn and fragrant in the cold. I didn't write anything down, didn't need to. The house was mine. The silence was mine. The choice was mine. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.